Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you joining us for this session, our PKB webinar on the PKB Pathway, understanding my classification and what tournaments are right for me. So look forward to kind of going through this content. There is a chat box option for this webinar. So if you do have any questions as we are going through this information, please do shoot a message there, and I'll either answer it then or we'll have a question and answer period at the end. We'll get started tonight. So I'm Mike Parker, the Executive Director of Girls Golf of America Foundation, co-founder of the Peggy Kirk Bell Tour. I've been with the tour since it was founded back in 2007 and have served as tour director during all that time. One of the things that we're really pleased with the tour is its continued growth over the years, the amount of members and girls that it's ultimately served, and the continued growth across the country now with our partnership with the LPGA and the LPGA USGA Girls Golf National Championship. So real excited for where the tour is now and where we're hoping to continue to grow it. The tour is part of the 501c3 nonprofit Girls Golf of America. That's our foundation that the PKB is housed in. Really three main goals with the tour. It's about ensuring the future of girls golf, trying to increase participation and interest, creating a venue for aspiring collegiate golfers to develop, compete, and be recognized, and to provide affordable top-level tournament competition and development in the competitive space for girls. Line we use a lot is trying to eliminate the boys tournament with the girls field. We're here for the girls to try to serve the girls, and all the things we do are designed to be in the girls' best interest as they look to compete and hopefully play in college or beyond. So tonight we're going to focus, kind of do a little bit of a primer on the PKB Pathway progression, how the PKB national schedule is actually structured, so you kind of understand the seasonality of it and how to leverage that to benefit your daughter the most as she's looking to get exposure and develop her game. How do rankings and how did the PKB evaluate your player? This goes into priority-based entry and how you ultimately gain access to some of the higher ranked tournaments. So trying to understand that process a little bit more. Then we'll kind of break it down by classification, so you can look at where your child is currently ranked and where a player of her caliber kind of fits in the PKB system, and then how do you progress from there, kind of understanding those steps. And ultimately, it's about your daughter reaching her goals and where she'd like to go. That's why this pathway exists. We have a great track record of these 18 years of girls going through this system and ultimately benefiting their development, whether it be at the collegiate or now at the professional games. Great to see Laura Coughlin, one of the early PKB players, play in the Solheim Cup this week and do so well. So great to see that life cycle go through. And like I mentioned, we'll have a question and answer forum there at the end. All right, so we'll start with the pathway progression. So the way the PKB is structured, as many of you know as participants of the tour, is a yardage skill-based development versus age. What that allows the tour to provide is a developmental track where a player moves at their own pace versus artificially based on their age. Players come to the game at different stages. As far as some come from team sports a little later, some played in the U.S. kids system since they were 7. So you have different places where players are starting points, but ultimately that end goal is trying to get to college golf. So our pathway is allowing these players to try to move through this. And I like those words at the top. It starts with confidence on the course. It's about then developing experience. Then it's about exposure. And then, it's rankings and things like that at the highest levels that maybe separate the players from the top. So these are the pieces that we're working to develop as we're moving along the pathway. looking kind of the purpose, so the PKB also has two defined pillars of competition: our national program and our regional program. Within the national program, we have some offshoots like our national championships. We'll talk about those. But you have these kind of two levels of competition that players can compete in, nationally or regionally. The classifications are how you move through this pathway. So class 4 being our youngest players, our 9-hole players, the 9 to 12-year-olds, and then working up through the classification 1, which are our players who are collegiate ready and are prepping for playing collegiate golf, playing collegiate yardages each tournament. One of the things that is key to know is in these classifications, it gives you access to multiple levels of competition. So our classification 3 players can play Futures National or Futures Regional. Our class 2 players can play Prep Preview and Futures National. Our class 1 players can play Bell National as well as Prep Preview, as well as Prep Regional. So there's different tournaments available to you, even though you may have classifications. It doesn't mean you're always at the top one, and we're going to go through that as we work through. And again, you see that yardage-based progression that we have as you move classification. As you look towards the PKB schedule, I can put this as seasonally so you can kind of see the flow. So the PKB season runs fall to summer. So we're right now just finishing up our regional program. Our national series ended in August, and we're kicking off our new season in less than a month in October, which is when the national series starts up again for next year. So the fall right now, we're just finishing up playing our championships for the series finales for the regional. The national season is going to get started in October. The big events in the fall are big invitationals. The main PKB invitational every November, our Tournament of Champions events in November and December. These are some of the biggest events that we run, both in prestige and quality of field and history. So those are these big fall events that kind of start off the season. Through the winter, we have regular weekly national events. These events do sell out a lot. These are very popular events. We go to a lot of the collegiate facilities. So a regular quality place to play. Historically, especially here on the East Coast where most of these events are, these are going to be the strongest girls events that are available to a competitive girl, female middle or high school level player in the country, are going to be held in this window through the PKB. So you're seeing that in this winter, early spring window. And we have our Linville Cup program, which is our regional champion leadership and team event, one of the most popular events we have for those that play at the regional level as they're starting to develop. This is a kind of a great experiential event that's held every January. As we transition to the spring, you have these big nationally ranked events. A couple in March, our Spring Invitational at UVA has become a top 25 event in the country. Multiple 54-hole championships. I don't talk a lot about WAGR in this presentation, but WAGR is a really important piece for those higher level players that are getting ready to go to college. That is ultimately the ranking system that's going to open up doors to you as you move into the amateur ranks. And they only rank 54-hole tournaments. So that's a big deal to kind of start establishing that ranking as you get to the highest levels of junior golf. Our national championship qualifiers for the LPGA USGA National Championship, which will be back again the second week in July this year. And then our regional program starts. So these regional series, these close to home 1- and 2-day events will get started in the spring. Then summertime, our tour championship for the national program every August at Pine Needles. Our qualifiers for our MB3 national championship are mostly held in the summer, and then we're at peak schedule for the regional program. So our developing players, this is peak time to being out there, developing their games, earning points to finish high in their order of merits in the regional. As we're looking to this next coming schedule, this next season is about to start. We have about 135, 140 events planned for the year. So it's a pretty robust schedule. 13 championships, including, like I mentioned, 9 54-hole WAGR ranked events for our highest level players. Be 42 plus national tournaments, including those LPGA National Championship qualifiers across the country. We've got 20 plus national championship for the Nota Begay, PKB Girls National Championship. Those are going to be held across the country again, as we have the last 3 years, and about 70 plus regional developmental events that are going to be held, including a more showcase one-day qualifiers at girls golf sites across the country to qualify players for the LPGA USGA National Championship. So in all, if we talk about Bell, Prep, Futures at our national level, 40 plus events available at the Bell and Futures national level and 25 plus events at the Prep Preview level. So there's lots of options for your player to find events that fit your schedule and are right for them as they're working through our pathway. These invitationals, like I mentioned, in the fall and throughout the year, big question we always get is, how do I qualify? How do I get in? These are all earned entry events. So earned entry can be many ways. A lot of them are play your way in. So whether that means it's your standing on an order of merit list, so how well you've done in this current season or previous seasons, finish if you win a PKB championship at the Bell National level, that automatically qualifies you for the PKB Invitational. Anytime you win a tournament at the national level or the regional level, you qualify for that Tournament of Champions, which is a big event again this fall. Performance index ranking also can automatically qualify you for certain PKB invitationals. And for a lot of these invitational events, we have qualifiers as well. For example, for the big invitational in November, the first 4 National Series 36-hole events all are going to qualify players for the invitational. So that's the way you can play your way in. Again, invitationals, these things are earned. Players do earn their rankings, and that can be used as a tool to get access. But at a lot of times, you can earn it on the course. So just showing up, playing well, and beating other players is what's going to get you access to better opportunities in these larger events. Some of the tournaments, especially at the invitational level, will have an at-large pool where we are trying to attract a lot of times new players to the PKB program, or players that are out of region, out of state, that we want to bring in. So we do have at-large pools for some of those. You will find if you see a tournament online and you try to register for it, it may ask you for a registration code. Anytime you're asked for a registration code, that means it's an invitational, that you have to earn that invitation and get that exemption code. Those are provided when you are officially invited into a tournament. And for these invitationals, as well as a lot of our national tournaments, almost all of the Bell National schedule, almost all of our championship level events use our priority-based entry system, which helps to bring the top players into these tournaments. Outside of that, you also have 2 national championship events that the PKB is a part of and runs. The first being the LPGA USGA National Championship. We had our inaugural championship this past June. Very excited. This is the first LPGA branded junior event to exist. So to have their increased support of competitive girls golf, and that was a really great build to what we do with PKB and the opportunity that it creates for the girls. So for this event, it has a qualifying structure. We have multiple ways through the Peggy Kirk Bell Tour that you can earn a spot in the national championship. Like I mentioned, there's showcase events, which are going to be done at the local LPGA USGA Girls Golf Club level. At different clubs across the country. The PKB Tradition events, these are our 36-hole tournaments that will be held across the country, where specific players in the Bell and the Futures divisions will qualify to go to the national championship. And then PKB invitationals and championship level events, event champions are also earning spots into the national championship. So there's multiple ways in for that, as well as for the PKB No to the Big A Girls Championship, the one that's on the Golf Channel each November. That has a two-tiered qualification system. So the lowest level, there are local qualifiers. Many of our regional events are local qualifiers. You also can be exempt based on your PKB Performance Index or your JGS, we're going to talk about national ranking. That can skip through that first phase. And then players come to regional finals. Like I mentioned, there's 20 plus regional finals across the country that will top players from those regional finals or who ultimately qualify for the national championship. So those are separate pathways to getting to higher level events, which we're going to talk about, kind of always looking to progress to the next outside of the traditional PKB regional national program that we offer. One of the things I get asked a lot, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is data and kind of tournament value. And this kind of is a chart that looks at kind of Bell, Futures, Prep, and then the MB3 regionals as far as the quality of the field. So this is using Junior Golf Scoreboard national rankings of players. And you can see the quality of the high level of events at the Bell national level and then working through the Prep level. And the Futures as far as the average. I took top 30 for high-level girls golf and competition. So we're talking about AJGA, we're talking about PKB, we're talking about those other invitational level events that are a lot of times co-ed. 30 girls is a typical field size. So that's a really good metric to look at as far as one field versus the next. So you can see I put some outside comparables there. Your PKB Bell events are looking like your AJGA Opens and your AJGA Invitationals, like our biggest invitationals. The CGA Vicky DeSantis is a really great tournament here in the Carolinas that looks like a middle level Bell national event. And as you work down, like the Prep preview, those look a lot like an AJGA preview, if you're familiar with it. There are tiers of programming. So there's a lot of value as you move down our pathway. It's not like it's only the valuable at the top. You're getting great tournament value as far as the quality of those fields. And the key thing about that is actually depth of field. It's not just the 2 or 3 best players at the top. It's where's the 20th ranked player in that field, or in this case, where's the 30th ranked player in those fields. That is where strength of field is coming from. And that's where your player can ultimately really benefit from the PKB program, is that you're in these deeper fields that's giving you a chance to beat more players in and around your skill level, which is how your ranking is going to improve, which is going to create more opportunities. So kind of shows you the tier. And then as you get to the bottom, and we're going to talk about this later, rankings really don't matter. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the value of rankings or even describing them all in deep detail. I do have another webinar already on that. So if you go to our webinars on our YouTube channel, you can watch that one if you want to get more in the weeds on the rankings themselves. But I am going to talk a lot about the data in those rankings tonight. So next is kind of how do I create my schedule? And the big thing there is just understanding there's the balance. It's resources. We don't have endless money and time to take off work to go to these tournaments. So which tournaments should I be playing in? Which ones are right for my child? What are we looking to get out of those tournaments? Is this we're going to try to win? Is this we're trying to qualify for a future event? Is this we're just going for experience? And at the end of the day, understanding that your focus needs to be on the advancement of their skills. It's not just how far you hit it. If you can't get a ball in the hole, it doesn't matter how far you hit your driver. You may not need to hit driver because that's not what's holding your game back. So understanding what you're truly trying to accomplish by that tournament and building towards the ultimate goal, which is how good is your daughter going to be in the latter part of her junior career and her college career and maybe beyond. That's what ultimately matters. So thinking about what these tournaments are doing to meet that goal and what we're trying to work. And like I mentioned, with all rankings, the easiest way to improve your ranking is just shoot lower scores. It doesn't matter where you do it or otherwise. If you just shoot really low scores, your ranking takes care of itself. There's no way around that. You can't fake your way to a higher ranking. You're ultimately going to have to play well. And then, as your ranking improves, then where you play does start to matter more. But at the end of the day, it's all about scores. So here's the next piece. So let's talk about, how does my ranking matter? So how does the PKB judge players? So we have two systems. The performance index, the PKB performance index, is the actual ranking system. So this is looking at all players across all tournaments within the PKB network, and where do you rank against other players that play in that system. The order of merit is looking at, that's a point standing. So that's within your subgroup. So whether that's the Bell National Series or the Futures Regional Series in North Carolina or the Prep Series in Georgia, it looks at how are you doing against your subgroup within that. So how are you, evaluating you against just your subgroup. So when we're doing performance-based entry, we're doing those type things, we're always looking at the ranking, the performance index. Whereas when we get to Tour Championship, that's about order of merit. That's about how have you done against your group. When we talk about rankings, so when I'm talking about JGS here in a second and PKB, any of these points-based systems, there's 4 factors that go into your ranking. What scores did you shoot? Where did you finish in the field? What was the tournament worth that you were playing in? And a lot of them have bonus points for winning. That is pretty universal across all the points-based ranking systems, those 4 pieces. And the biggest thing, scoring differential, which is how did you score? Scoring differential takes into account the difficulty of the golf course. So a par on a golf course, when you look at a tournament, we have the course rating listed next to the yardage of the tournament. That tells you par for that round. So par is almost never 72 for a competitive tournament. It is actually another number. So typically for a Bell event, you would probably going to see numbers 75, 74 and a half, 75 and a half. That's where you're going to see what is actually par for a scratch golfer. So that's the number that is being used to judge how your child played on that course. Whereas if we come back, like at the prep preview level, you're looking at 73, 74 as course ratings, maybe 72 and a half. And at the futures level, at the national level, it's probably 71, 72. That's what you're normally going to see as your course ratings. Scoring differential is going to make up about 2/3 of your ranking, pretty much in give or take, in most of the ranking systems. It carries the most weight by far. Where did you finish? So that's kind of the strength of field. How many players did you beat? How good were the players in the field? A lot of times that's about 1/4 of what your ranking comes from, is some version of analysis. Each of the systems does that a little different. And then, that extra 5% here and there is revolving around wins or high finishes and the points that they give you. So again, the PKB ranking system right now, for priority-based entry, we use 2 national ranking systems, the PKB Performance Index and the Junior Golf Scoreboard. We are doing some evaluations on a new system that's out there. It's called Tugger, which uses a head-to-head model versus a points-based model. Really like the theory behind what they're doing, and now it's just for them getting data integrity and kind of working through the strength of that. But that is something we're also monitoring. We haven't implemented it yet into our algorithm for priority entry, but it is something we're monitoring because I think it does show a lot of promise. But right now we're using the Junior Golf Scoreboard and the PKB Performance Index as the main sources for evaluating your player. And again, coming back to priority-based entry, that's how we're determining who gets in, again, on those two screens. And why we do priority-based entry, why we don't just do sign up and play for all events is, as you move up in the rankings, again, strength of field is very valuable. That means how good the bottom of the field is just as important as how good the top of the field is. So being able to create groups, that's why Prep Preview exists for our Class 1 players. That's why, it's not just I have to get in the Bell Division. The Prep Preview is a really strong tournament at that level for players in that transitional ranking. So you're getting that value. We're guaranteeing that all players, the highest players and the developing players, are getting the most value out of that tournament that they're playing in. We understand that every player wants to play against better players. And, we all want to play against Macy Pate when Macy Pate was the number one player. But that doesn't mean that's right at that moment. So it's all about growing, developing, and getting to where that is the appropriate piece. When you're looking at our schedule, priority-based entry, you'll see that there's like an underline. It actually says priority really thin under the schedule. That shows you which events are priority-based entry. If you're a high-ranked player, you will automatically be able to register. You'll see it on the tournament page. It will tell you what the exempt cutoff is. A lot of times, if you're a top 1,000 player or different levels, you may already be exempt. So you'll be able to register immediately. Otherwise, it's going to put you on the Class 1 or Class 2 wait list. That allows you to say, I am interested in playing this tournament, and you're put into a queue to be evaluated at the priority-based clothing deadline. The key thing to remember is if you're charged an entry fee, you are guaranteed a spot in that field. The question may be, if you're on a wait list, is which division you're ultimately going to compete in. But if it doesn't charge you, then you are truly waitlisted until the priority closing date. Those priority closing dates are usually about 32 days, so 4.5 weeks out from the tournament. That's when we do that processing. So you'll know with a month in advance whether you are in or out of a tournament, to give you time to plan, travel, and otherwise to go. So, all right, so let's talk about where your player may be on this pathway. So what's next, looking at the different levels of competition. So our classification 4, like I mentioned, this is our youngest players. These are ages 9 to 12. What we call our discovery division is our competition level at this age bracket. These are mostly or 9-hole tournaments. Sometimes it's a 2-day 18-hole event. Again, this is about development. This is getting these players access to some tournament opportunities and starting to work your way through. For our really high performers in classification 4, we do have an underage exemption program, which provides some opportunity for them to get into some futures national events before they age in. These opportunities are very limited. Being that we do not use age divisions, we are very concerned about the competitive and social atmosphere that also comes with tournament golf for the PKB. So we don't have really young players playing in our national events very often for that reason. It just isn't a fit to where we are. The U.S. Kids program exists and others to kind of get those national level opportunities. But again, there are some. At the LPGA Girls National Championship, we have a discovery division. At Regional Tournament of Champions, these players are able to play up, and then other select events. And that makes up about 5% of the total PKB program. Our classification 3 is our largest. It's about 43% of our total membership. These are players just like our classification 2 and classification 1 that are in their 12-year-old year. So for PKB for this upcoming season, that means that you turn 12 before September 30th of 2025. If you meet that standard, so if you turn 12 before September 30th of 2025, you can start playing now. You do not have to wait until your birthday. You are eligible to be a PKB participant at the national level once you meet that age. One of the key things to remember, and you may not know, is that 55% of our classification 3, those that are competing at the Futures National and Futures Regional level, are high school players. So, a lot of times people think it's the younger division, and that's actually not the case by its demographics. It's actually more high school players than younger players. What you'll find, especially at the national level, a lot of the champions at this level are really high-performing younger players that are coming up, that are really quality. Those are a lot of times the players that are winning at this level, but it actually makes up less than 50% of the actual population. Our scoring reference for this group is about, players that can shoot under 120 from the red tees in 18 holes. Average national ranking, the performance index is somewhere around 650. A junior golf scoreboard, it's around 3,000. For Tugger, it's around 3,500. But you can see at the high end, again, there's a player in the top 100 of PKB that is still a classification 3. This is a very high performing young player. Same for junior golf scoreboard. They're already ranked in the top 1,400 in the country, but they're a younger player that's just starting. They're still competing at futures yardages, even though they're a really, really strong performer. So you're going to see that fluctuation within the different divisions. As we move up to our classification 2, again, it's the same age demographic as classification 3. What you're going to see now is it's starting to skew a lot older. So 94% of these players are in high school. For scoring reference, these are players that have a scoring differential under 18. So that means at a futures tournament, you are shooting in the mid to high 80s. That's your regular scoring. That doesn't mean you shot that score once. That means that is the average. That is the standard that you set. So these players, an average performance index is going to be in the high 400s. For junior golf scoreboard, these are players that the average ranking is somewhere in the 2,600 range. And in Tugger about 25, so similar. And again, you see the best, a top 75 player is still at classification 2. Again, this is probably a high performing young player that's starting to make the progression. Same with junior golf scoreboard, 638 could still be a classification 2 player as they're working up, depending on their age. And then as we progress to classification 1, this is the top level of competition we have on the PKB. It makes up 28% of our membership. It's 93% high school players. Again, this is players whose scoring differential are under 8. So at the prep level, this means you're shooting in the 70s from 5,800 yards consistently. Not, again, I didn't just shoot one round. I didn't just beat that one bell player once in a tournament. That means that we're consistently doing that to show a standard to be able to move into that classification 1. The classification 1 standard has gotten more strict as the tour has continued to grow. The quality of players continues to increase. That standard continues to lower. What it's trying to do is trying to create balance among the different tiers of tournaments. We don't want to give a player a status that they can't use. So we want people, a lot of the next things I'm going to talk about is expectation setting, understanding what are these opportunities for your child and what you should be focused in on. And again, looking at classification 1s, these are the best players in the country. So for a PKB player, that's in the top, 150 to 200, top 1,000 players in JGS. Same with Tugger. And, these are the best players that are in the country playing junior golf. All right, so let's take a look. Let's break down those classifications a little deeper by ranking and understanding kind of what tournaments are there. So how do I progress through this pathway based on your ranking? So again, I'm going to break it down by tier. So we're going to look at by your ranking, your probable classification, if you're a high school player, a middle school player, what that means. And then we'll look at the main national tournament options are there, and then the goals for that player in those tournaments. And a good thing to remember here is an average national ranking for a top 24 player in a PKB Invitational is 625. So that's a very high standard to get into those best events. So again, remember, you may have classification 1 status, but that doesn't mean that you're getting into a lot of these tournaments. You're still going to be a process to work your way up to the highest level tournaments. All right, so I'm going to start. We're going to work from the best, the highest ranked players back to our developing players. So if I'm a top 1,000 player, you're a classification 1 player. You are looking to play at the Bell National Invitational and Championship level. You are looking at the highest ranked tournaments we have, playing against the best fields that we have. These are the tournaments that are going to provide value to a player in the top 1,000. You're also getting direct entry into this, like the AJGA has fully exempt. This is starting to open up those doors for you to be able to pick your schedule more predicting, because you'll automatically qualify for most of the tournaments. At the goals for a top 1,000 players within the PKB is you're showing up trying to win. This is, when you're coming, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to beat a lot of players in my grouping and show that I can move up. The thing that you're going to find is the higher your ranking gets, or the lower your ranking gets, the harder it is for it to improve, because there's less spacing between the players. The quality starts to narrow. So getting in these fields, performing well, is what ultimately is going to be the difference between you being ranked 750 or 500 or 250, is getting into these tournaments and winning, making high finishes, and beating these players in front of you. And again, it's looking for ways to qualify for those big national events. So can you get to US Girls? Can you get to the LPGA National Championship? Can you get to the PKB Invitational? Can you get to some of the big independent events? And they're using national ranking as status to get into those tournaments. So developing that profile is really important to kind of making that last final jump to the top echelon of junior golf. The next group as we'll look is players 1,000 to 1,500. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump 500 ranking points at a time. And that's kind of important to understand why. And that is, a player ranked 1,400 and a player ranked 1,200 are very, very similar. We found, like, there's just not, it doesn't matter if your ranking went up 10 points or went down 10 points in a given week. Do not get into those ranking systems and stress about the small fluctuations. You want to look at a more broader. Am I 1,500 to 1,000? Am I 1,000 to 600? Are you making those incremental moves in 3, 6, 9 month, 12-month intervals? That's what ultimately matters. The week-to-week fluctuations, there's no coach in America that has ever looked at the rankings and said, that person's ranked 1451, I'm taking them over 1452. Like, there's so much margin for error within these systems, because in junior golf, the players do not play against each other that often. It's not like the PGA Tour, where there's consistent fields against the same people, where you can start to glean a ton more knowledge from that data. So understand that you have to step back from these pieces to understand that growth. Now, you're going to say, Mike, that's contradictory to what you're saying as far as getting into tournaments, because it does matter, because I need to be in front of that person to get in and otherwise. And there's a small portion of that is true as far as moving. You always want to continue improving your ranking, but you don't want to just stress that little small differences are make or break, because that's not what it's going to be. College coaches are looking at it from a zone potential. How are you within this margin of error with other players that they're recruiting? And then they're going to look at the eye test. They're going to look at all the other variables that go into what they're looking for, the intangibles, the swing speed, the driver distance, your family, your parents. Yes, they're watching. Those are the things that are going to start to separate you within players within your ultimate zone. So as we come back to the players within 1,000 to 1,500, these are most likely classification 1 players. Some of them you're going to get some direct access, but mostly you're looking at Bell National events. But at the invitational level, that you may not be in that. You may not get into a Bell Invitational at this ranking. So you may have to find other events within those time periods to be able to keep working up. For a middle school player that's reached this ranking, this is where, again, you're probably trying to play in Bell National events as well as these prep preview championship level events or the priority events. These are going to provide a lot of ranking value for an up and coming player who's not in the recruiting window yet, that is still trying to work their way up. You may be, again, for what is the goal of the tournament? For an 1,000 to 1,500 player who's in high school, this is about exposure to college. That's what you're getting at the Bell National and the prep preview level. If you're playing 5,800 yards or more, you're getting that exposure. Just keep that in mind when you're looking at other tournaments and outside groups. If they're not playing 5,800 yards, it's just not going to be looked at the same by the coaches because that's not a comparable yardage to what they may be playing at that level. Keep in mind at the high Division I level, they're playing 6,200 to 6,400 yards regularly. At the mid-major level, Division I, they're playing 6,200 yards. So those are the tournaments. They're looking for players that are pushing 6,000 yards so they can understand where that player is in development and how they may apply when they come play their tournament. If I'm a middle school player, I'm looking about ranking development. I'm setting myself up. I'm already a high performer. I'm trying to get ready for an elite schedule in these next couple of years that follow. So I'm using these tournaments to start showing my skill against the best in the country. Kind of a fun fact to look in, the average national ranking for the last player in. So this is who is the lowest ranked player in a PKB championship. That lowest ranked player in average 1,500. So if you're not in this group, you're not getting in to Bell National high ranked events. And again, that's average. So half the events, it needed to be lower than that. And the other half, it's just slightly higher. So just keep that in mind as far as where you are currently ranked as to what you may get in. Probably a good time to mention, Mike, you're talking about Junior Golf Scoreboard. How do I even know what I am ranked or performance-based index? So if you go to your PKB account, if you pull up your player on the main tournaments, or if you're at a tournament participants list, you can see all the players' performance index and Junior Golf Scoreboard. Those are the two rankings that are listed, those two numbers listed right below your name. So we automatically populate that data so you can see the strength of the fields that you're in, where your daughter compares to those around her, and get a feel for the overall quality and again, this progression that your daughter is on. So the next group we're going to look at is that 1,500 to 2,000 ranked player. Again, this is most likely a classification 2 player. Some of these players are going to be getting classification 1 status, especially those in high school. This is that kind of tough zone. We get a lot of phone calls to our office about players in this area because especially this time of year, you have gone back home to play in your local state and regional programming, and you play against the higher ranked players, those higher ranked Bell National players when you go home, because those tournaments are everybody's included. There's no standard as far as who gets into those tournaments. So you're everybody's in that same pool, and you may have beaten that player once or in these events, you may have beaten them on a given day. But when you come back to the PKB here in the fall, winter, you're going back into that national pond. And that is a big group that has a lot of diversity. We're pulling from 34 different states now of players that are playing in these tournaments. So the quality just continues to rise and rise. So though you feel that you are equal to those players, at this moment in time, your ranking profile does not match that yet. So there's still some work to be done to show what you believe. And when we're telling you something you may not want to hear or saying she didn't get into this tournament yet, it's not us critiquing your skills of your daughter or she's never going to make it. That's not what this is. It's saying at this given moment, there's still, again, work to be done to develop that ranking profile. There's still spots to be earned to improve that ranking. And again, the way to do that is to go do it on the course. You can't do it sitting at home. You've got to go out and prove what you believe is kind of the term that I use in our office when I'm talking. If you believe that you are better than those players, then you have to go prove it out on the course. And that will be reflected in the rankings, provided that you're playing in tournaments that are right for your player. If you choose to stay and play local events, you're probably not getting the ranking value that's going to propel you up. So, choosing applicable events to your skill set is what ultimately is going to help there. So for a 1,500 to 2,000 ranked player, if you're in high school, that means you're probably playing a full prep preview schedule. So you're prioritizing the prep preview level. And you'll be able to mix in some of the Bell National events, specifically the sign up and play Bell National events, which there are a few, but not as many. So those are giving you the opportunity to use the prep preview schedule to perform. The goal for a high school player in this ranking is really ranking development. You need to improve those. That's going to get you direct access to more Bell events. That is, you may not be staying in the prep preview very long. In an ultimate goal, you wouldn't be there very long at all. Go out there, play, show, 5,800 yards. I can shoot in the mid to low 70s. That's going to move you out of that 1,500 to 2,000 ranking if you can do that. If you can't, then we still have more work to do on the developmental side so that you can, and that's not a problem. Coaches are not looking at 5,800 yard plus tournaments negatively. Just because you're not playing in the Bell division is not holding you back in the recruiting process. The prep player goes to college again, and I show this slide. Amanda Sambach won the prep series her second year. These are the best players now in the country. They went through this process. They didn't skip these steps. So it is a proven kind of piece that works. If I'm a middle school player that's in this 1,500 to 2,000, again, the prep preview schedule, I'm starting to really test myself with that longer yardage. We're probably not as long off the tee. So that 5,800 yard setup is really going to stress your long irons, your hybrids, your short game. So we're really focused on that. You're going to be prioritizing that prep preview order of merit. Can I finish high up in that order of merit? Can I finish first or second and automatically get into the invitational the next year from that standing? So we're looking at, again, trying to apply our skills at the longer yardages, trying to win at that, and developing our rankings as we're moving up. And the average player, so the top 30 player for a Bell event is 1,650. That's the average across all Bell National events. So if you're in this zone, again, you're not getting into many Bell events. So you're still, you're having to push to the high end of this and higher to be able to consistently get in to those Bell events. The next grouping is our 2,000 to 2,500 players. So these are classification 2 or 3 players. So a high school player who's at this level, the prep preview schedule is your focus. Getting in there, starting to play better, top 15, top 10 finishes within that. That's going to start really pushing your ranking up quick. The nice thing about this ranking level is you can really improve your ranking quickly with lower scores. So there's lots of quick moving by lowering your scoring differential. If I'm a if I'm a middle school player, you're probably still at the Futures National level here. You're competing to try to win at that level. You're developing your, winning mindset, and you're sleeping on a lead and all those things that go into being a tournament tested golfer. Our high school players, this is about experience at collegiate yardage. We're getting to that experience. Ranking really doesn't matter yet. We're still just, we're getting that experience. We're improving. We're doing better in the tournaments. Our middle schoolers, again, we're learning how to compete at this point. It's all about competitive experience. So for a national ranking of a top 20 player in a prep preview event, like I was talking about. So these are these priority prep preview events. The top 20 player, the ranking of that player, so this is the 20th player in the field, is less than 2,000. So even getting into those fields is going to be difficult if you're not in the top 2,000. But again, that's what shows when you put 20 players in that ranking group all together, if you can go out and beat that group, your ranking really improves because it shows you're better than all the players around you. And that's what the big value about Prep Preview provides you. And then ultimately Bell National when you get to that, because the group you're playing in is all like people. It doesn't have the really large fluctuations that you're going to see in the age divisions where you have every girl who's 16 to 18 in your division, which means you may have some really good players, but you've also got 4 or 5 players who are ranked 3,000. So that can have a negative impact on a strength of field because the average of that field is much weaker because of the lower ranked players that are in it. By the way, the PKB creates these subgroups, these flights of competition, it gives you a stronger tournament to ultimately develop in because you're playing against like players. So the rankings see that and can make that evaluation more quickly. Also gives you more opportunity to beat players in and around your ranking versus that other format where there's, if I'm ranked 1,500, am I really going to beat the 300 ranked player very often? No, not really. I'd much rather be playing against the 900 and 1,000 and 1,200 ranked player that I can go beat and move up in front of them because I'm showing I'm better than they are. And last, I'm looking at the 2,500 and more, your unranked players. This is all about tournament experience. The rankings mean zero at this point. We're focused on development. We're focused on learning how to shoot lower scores. Can we break 80 in competition? Can we break 85? Can we break 90? Whatever it is, wherever you are in that pathway, this is what tournaments are about. Getting that competitive experience. Like I mentioned earlier, this is for middle school players coming in. You may be coming from US Kids or others. This is welcome to big girl golf. I'm in the bigger pond of national competition. I may have played locally. I may have played my association's regional tour. Okay, my state tour. Now I'm trying to play at a higher level. So we're trying to get into that. So last, I'm just going to talk about the changing in classification. When is the right time? I have this slide I use a lot. So there's kind of 4 things I ask if I'm talking to some family trying to figure this out. You need to answer 3 of these yes for it probably to be a good idea to try to move classification. So do my scores justify a stiffer test in competition from the course, whether it's difficulty or yardage? Do my finishes justify a different test, more stiffer test from the field? So if you're winning all the time, it's time. We need to create more new carrots. We need to move goals. Is my driving distance long enough to compete at the longer yardages? The key thing to remember is when you get to the prep and the Bell level, the par 4s get to 360 to almost 400 yards. So you've got to have enough driver distance to be able to, are you able to get on these par 4s in 2? And last, does my age justify an acceleration of the progression? The running out of time piece. Sometimes that's going to happen. We may need to move a player who's in their junior or senior year to get to those 5,800-yard tournaments so they can show college coaches. One of the great things that's happened in the last 5 years is the growth of Division III college golf. So more players have the opportunity for a student-athlete experience collegiately. So we want to give those players the ability to show those coaches what they can do. Again, a Division III tournament typically is going to play 5,800 yards. That's a pretty standard college tournament at that level. So you're getting the chance to show those coaches what you can do. Could you make their roster if you wanted to play at that level? Back to my trust the process. Like I mentioned, Amanda, before, this slide right here, this is back from 2012. This is the futures level. What makes this interesting is the number 3, the number 6 players. Those are the players that are currently playing on the LPGA Tour right now, not the number 1 and number 2. Number 2 player won a world championship back in US Kids. Went on to play in college, but that's not the player that's playing on tour right now. So just remember, just because you're not exactly where you want to be, and this was a year-end standing, so this was a goal I'm sure a lot of these players had. Just because that didn't happen, it does not mean that the end game is away from you. It just means this is part of the process. This is the process that you're in. So stay confident. Understand from our side, from the PKBs, the pathway we've created, the standards we have. we have 18 years of data and history to help educate us on how best to formulate this system. Like we have, we understand when you are calling in and asking questions, you care about one thing, and that's your daughter. And I fully, fully respect that and understand that from us, we don't have the emotion that you're bringing to it. So we can talk to you from a step back point of view of, okay, here's the bigger picture of the developmental process that your daughter is in. I've seen, especially when I'm talking to players, when I look at a player and I see their ranking profile, I see their age, I can think of 3, 5, 10 players before her that were the exact same player at one point in the past. And here's how they made it through this to get to where they wanted to go. And ultimately, again, most of those players, it's, can I get to the college level? Can I get a college scholarship? Nice transition to that. Over 2,000 girls now have gone through the PKB system to play in college. Blessed to have Brandy Jackson, our college recruiting consultant, on board with the tour to help provide education and resources to families as you're looking to start the recruiting process. All 325 programs have had a PKB alum participate. So that's really cool to see the impact of what the tour has done over these years. Final thoughts as I wrap up, and then I'll take some questions. The PKB, again, the advantage the PKB has is it's just girls, as you know. So that means every decision we make, where we put the pins, how we set up the course, everything we do is how does it best benefit girls golf? We don't have to care about having boys on the same course at the same time. It doesn't impact any of our decisions. The girls don't get the last tee times when they show up to a tournament. That doesn't happen. What we've built over these 18 years is a great national network of exposure. And it continues to prove out as players who have come through this continue to do well. Melanie Green just won the British Amateur. Anna Morgan was one of the top collegians in the year, just qualified for the LPGA event in her first professional events this weekend after a great career at Furman. These are players that played through the system and have gone on. Riley Smythe's having a breakout professional year on the Epson Tour, trying to earn her tour card. So there's a pass. I haven't talked much about the AJGA. I understand the value that it provides, but what I want you to understand is you don't have to chase that to get where you want to get. It's a tool that many players will use because it's valuable, but that is. And then, it's about advancement. All right, so question and answer. I've got a couple already popping up here. So if you do have one, please throw it in the chat. I will try to answer them real quick. Yes, the video will be up. We'll have it on our YouTube channel with our webinars, as well as a registered member of this webinar. It will be emailed to you as well. The 2025 winter spring schedule is almost complete. We expect to have it out before the end of the month. So most of the schedule is in place. We're just working with courses. As many of you know, post-COVID, golf demand is at an all-time high since I've been doing this, and course access is quite a challenge. The biggest issue we are having is getting weekend tournaments. That has slowed us down and being able to get our tournament schedules out faster because we are having to really work developing new relationships to be able to bring tournaments in. It's definitely a big challenge that we face. Luckily, we do have some longstanding relationships with facilities that we're able to come back to year after year. But it is the biggest challenge as a tour that we face now, is being able to get courses that will have us at a price that's not astronomical. As you've probably noticed, our PKB entry fees have risen the last couple of years, and that's been reflective of what we're having to pay the courses to get access. But we're still lower than most of the other, national, for sure, all the other national entities. But we really are working to stay cost conscious with our entry fees based on our why our nonprofit exists. How many tournaments per year is a great question. A lot of that. So first, it's how much is your player one of those that loves to play more than practice? If that's the case, then you probably are scheduling a little more tournaments than not. The key thing to remember, and if you haven't ever read anything on peak performance, I would encourage you to understand that concept more. Is a player cannot perform at their best 4 straight weekends. Like, you just can't keep turning the switch on and on and on and expect it always to come at full tilt. There's a degrading of emotional and physical performance that comes from repeat use. So what you want to do with schedule is looking at priorities. Like, what are the things that are most important for your year? Is it qualifying for this big national event? Is it, I want to qualify for the PKB Tour Championship at this division, or whatever that skill is? I want to raise my ranking to this. You need to understand what those goals are, and then identify what tournaments are going to give you the best opportunity to achieve those goals. And then you prioritize, okay, how do I get in those tournaments? So I think that's how you have to work at your schedule. It's not, okay, what's next month? What's a tournament I can go to? You need to take a bigger look at it if you want to be very strategic in giving your player the chance. Because, for example, if you have a high priority event that's the last weekend of the month, you don't want to play the 3 weekends leading up to it. You want to play maybe 1 or 2, or maybe it's 1 tournament and 2 practice rounds or otherwise. You've got to think about how you're preparing your player to show up to that big tournament and being the best one that you can. So on average, players, are playing 18 to 24 tournaments a year. Thanks, Robert, for that tidbit. So that would be probably kind of a scale. So, but it's the wrapping season. I'm not sure what the wrapping season, you're asking about October 12th and 13th. Could you give me a number? Could you give me another piece on that to your question? And I'll try to answer it. Nicole, thank you for the shout out. Nicole was a former PKB player who played Division I golf. Played Division I golf, now has a junior golfer. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions that I can answer? Again, our next schedule is going to be coming out here at the end of the month. We usually about 3 months in advance for each season. So you're going to get the winter, early spring schedule here. By the end of the year, you're going to get the rest of the spring and summer national schedule, and the start of the regional programs will come out. And then the rest of the regional schedules will launch in the first quarter of 2025. So if you've got any other questions, please throw them in the chat. I see we're right here at our time. So again, things that I just wanted to throw out here at the end. We're here to help. If you have questions about your daughter, where she is, what tournaments you should be playing in, please reach out to me. My phone number, shoot me an email. I'm happy to have a discussion with you to help you better understand specifically what is right for your daughter. Brandy is a great resource as you're starting to get into the recruiting process. You get a free 30-minute consultation with her as part of your membership. 100%, no matter where you are in the process, doing that 30 minutes and being able to have her give you more education. Did have just a question pop up about considering adding practice rounds to entry fees. The problem with that is it forces a higher entry fee on everybody in the tournament. We do get a negotiated practice round rate with the courses so that players can get a lower rate when they come to play. But we're definitely cognizant of keeping the tournaments as affordable as possible to all players within the tournaments. So we don't do a fixed practice round except for a couple of our most elite level tournaments where we do book in the practice round. But that's the reason why you don't see that guaranteed throughout. And again, as I mentioned before, we are having plenty struggles just getting a course to allow us to have guaranteed 2 days of play versus trying to get a third. So Growth into New England, we are working on it. We have the MB3 qualifiers there. We're hoping to have a LPGA National Tradition event there. We continue to grow. As with any business, and especially a nonprofit business, how many events we can run and where we can run them is really based off of resources. So we continue to try to fundraise and write grants and different things that can help us continue to grow. So we're working on it. There's definitely demand. I know we have a lot of really strong players from New England that are coming south to play in tournaments for better weather a lot of times. But we are working on hoping to continue to add more there, as well as the Midwest and now the West, especially those major metro markets where you're starting to see tournaments. Do have some financial assistance programs. So if your player, or if you know other players, player on your high school team that's looking to get started, we have a first tournament free program at our regional level. We have grants to assist with entry fees. So please have them reach out to us. Again, we don't want a player not to play because they can't afford it. That's what this foundation is here for, is to create access. And last, like I mentioned, we have a YouTube channel that has our webinars. So hopefully go check those out if you have any want to learn more about rankings, or Brandy has a couple in there about recruiting. So until next time, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. If you have questions, please do reach out. And we look forward to another great season, our 19th on the PKB this coming year. So thank you for your time. Have a great evening.